Peace and love, everybody. Salute and welcome to another episode of Black No Sugar with your girl, Sugar Free Mars. So, the presidential debate took place last evening, and I definitely wanted to briefly share with you some takeaways that I got and just my overall analysis of the spectacle. Now, for starters, and probably most notably for me, was the fact that I did not hear at all from either candidate, what the plan was, what their vision is for the citizens of this country, the concrete tangibles that we could look forward to over the next 4 years. I didn't have a clear pathway into any of that. But what I did see unfolding nonstop throughout the debate was a barrage of filibustering, shaming, lambasting, and all the like going on. That's what I saw. That's what was consistent from start to finish. But what I, and I'm sure many cognizant people were awaiting, was an address and a solution-based planned system of action that would tackle the myriad concerns that never seem to meet resolve for one reason or another in this nation. Year after year, election after election, all the promises are made of all sorts, of all the cliche and expected talking points, right? They never go without being mentioned. Yet, every 4 years, the same issues are needing redress. The same issues are being put on the table as if we weren't supposed to have figured this out the previous election or the election previous to that, and so forth and so on. What I'd like to finally begin seeing is some resolve and some answers to the ever-present questions that just never seem to be able to be effaced completely. From the presidential, prospects, what I was looking to hear, were poignant things that intimately and directly impact the lives of Americans, and particularly of Black Americans in this country, the people of my community. I heard no such things. And in fact, Black people were not dressed at all. Not for one moment throughout the entire hour and a half spectacle that took place. Black people were not addressed even once in our matters of concern. From those prospects, I was looking to hear an address on skyrocketing rental rates across the country. Things like that. Real deal things that millions of people, including myself, deal with on a day-to-day basis. Okay? Places like New York and LA and Miami are having residents who rent holding on by a thread just to be able to afford their rent. Okay? Places like even North Carolina are seeing steady increases in rental rates, where before, it was something like a haven for people who opted to leave the cities due to those high rates and go off to places like Charlotte or throughout the South, where the cost of living was doable and the quality of life much more agreeable, because you get 3 times as much space paying half of what you'd pay for a tiny 1-bedroom in a quote unquote big city. I heard no such concerns addressed about housing that can be made more sustainable and cost efficient for the millions of people who do not own homes. Now, I heard about her $25,000, credit to first-time home buyers or whatever have you. But what about the half of the population that are not homeowners? Likewise, I heard nothing about matters concerning gentrification and its effects across what they call, quote unquote, the urban areas. No talk of such things as gentrification, and how thousands of people find themselves being forced out of their neighborhoods due to the pressure of those increased rates of living in areas that people have lived in for decades, some many decades. It's insane. And no one spoke about it. Nobody even brought it up. I did not hear about matters concerning the cleaning up of the public school system, for example, either. I didn't hear about programs that can be, made and that set out to provide kids, let's say, with an optimal experience in their classroom. Because kids are there, how long? It's basically a full-time job, 6 hours, sometimes 8, depending on if there's an after-school program, because some kids may have to, wait an extra an hour or two for their parents to come get them or their caretaker or whoever. So these kids are in school 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, like a full-time job. I heard nothing about the optimization of the classrooms and the entire experience of students during their hours in school. I heard no plans about the renovation of old buildings that house many of these children. Nothing about the remodeling of the many outdated school buildings throughout the nation, and particularly within the quote-unquote inner cities. Some of them dilapidated, some of them needing updating and haven't been updated since the 70s or the 80s. I didn't hear about training methods proposed for teachers and staff to begin formulating proper practices that allow for better, let's say, student-teacher relations or parent-teacher relations. Nothing related to the systems and the programs that can be set in place to better all of the dynamics within the education system. I heard nothing, of course, of police violence and brutality that is still rampant, still going unbridled within Black communities across the country. No mention of processes and possible plans of action that can propose, let's say, taking more stringent measures in providing training to officers and precincts that practice things like, how about you de-escalate and properly assess a situation before fucking shooting? No such things. I heard no concerns about how officers are being able literally to walk into the home of their choosing and shoot dead the resident without so much as a shrug of the shoulder. No talk whatsoever about police mendacity. Okay? Now, I did hear, Trump rebuke, I think, Kamala's stance on defunding the police or whatever other stance that she may have had. But the reality is that, the defunding of the police is not going to abate the terrorism against the Black community. It's not going to abate the amount of victims per year at the hands of this police brutality against our people. Neither candidate made mention of any such matters. No mention whatsoever was made of the terrorism against Black people, regardless of age or sex. It's an incessant issue within our community. I also heard nothing, no talk of mass incarceration issues and how the piling up of Black bodies has not ceased an inch in 15 years. No talk of harsh sentencings being reviewed and thwarted for people who committed nonviolent crimes, right? No talk of lessening of sentences and dealing with that properly. No talks of plans for rehabilitation for men and women who serve their time and intend to reassimilate into the population. Where are the talks about their rehabilitation? Where is their therapy and talks of work for them and programs for these people on the road to recovery and restoration of themselves? Where are the reformative programs for people who come out and show a seriousness about changing their lives and making better decisions for themselves and their families? Where is the reconstruction on these people that are coming out of the prison system? No talk of that. No talk of the families impacted. And then you got the matters, of healthcare, which is an absolute nightmare in this country, because too many people cannot afford it. I know it's a talking point that they love to, throw flowers over, but it's a real serious point of discussion that is not addressed properly in my view and never is. Too many people cannot afford it, even while working and maintaining a full-time job. It's absolutely outrageous. I don't know where you guys live, but in big cities, it's crazy. With the cost of rent and utilities and shopping needs and car notes and emergency contingencies set aside, one can barely think straight. Not one of them mentioned by what percentage they intend on decreasing coverage rates for even the most basic plans, and how those basic plans of coverage should still be of good enough quality to ensure, that people are taken care of, no matter what their financial backing and standing is as a citizen. There are so many people that I know personally who opt to not even have health care because they have other things to take care of, like making sure, these lights and this hot water is running, for the next month or so, or 6 months or so. Like, what is going on? Nobody should be living like this. And not to mention the people who have children to provide for. All of this is up in the air, and no such concerns were posed last evening in this debate. What I also found deplorable was that there was also no talk about, people in these inner cities that they usually love to make reference to. Okay? There was no talk of the inner city, the quote unquote urban, AKA us. Not even an eye was bat in our direction. Okay? There was no discussion of us whatsoever. And in that meant that there was no address or discussion about how people of these quote unquote urban inner cities have poor access to things like proper grocery stores where the produce isn't rotting, where the meats aren't pungent, and the store itself isn't, something like a shack somewhere. No address about these concerns. No talk of the deeply segregated neighborhoods that leave people in the lower income bracket completely susceptible to harsh living conditions and poor access to everything, where they cannot get up and turn the corner and go to the Whole Foods or the Trader Joe's. They got to walk a country mile or damn near, hop on a bus, however many miles over just to get access to something like that, to some fresh grapes, to some lush green kale or romaine lettuce, to good quality meats and poultry. This is the reality among our communities, people. Why are Black communities rampant with Chinese stores and McDonald's and liquor stores, but we can't get a fresh market? These things are not spoken about. These things are not even looked at as it pertains to speaking about our people in this country. And these are the heavily saturated issues tied to systemic racism that we deal with and that this country refuses to acknowledge on any platform. And it was exhibited firsthand for all of you last night with the refusal to acknowledge anything close to such matters. I can really go on and on about the disparities within our communities and just across the nation that impact just American life as a whole on all levels. And it was quite disheartening, to sit back and watch, the insult that was being done to the intelligence of the American public. What I saw last night was a reality show. It was nothing short of basically an episode of Judge Judy or Judge Goddamn Mathis. That's what it felt like to me, quite frankly. And there was a portion that was just absolutely revolting to me, of course, amid everything else. But there was a portion that I found to be absolutely revolting, and that was a moment where the interviewer presented a question that I guess in some world, in his mind, or whoever wrote the question's mind, was supposed to address matters of race relations in this country. Now, I don't know in what world or in what dimension the question that was posed was supposed to suffice as an acknowledgement of race relations in whatever, dimension that exists in. But that's what was postured for some reason. And the interviewer, asks Trump about Kamala's blackness, basically, about the matter of her being black or not black. This is the question that was supposed to address race relations in America, you guys. I was astounded, absolutely appalled, you guys. And Trump's response to that was basically that he doesn't care what race she chooses to be this week or next week. 1 minute she's black, next minute she's not. Either way, he doesn't give a damn. That was pretty much his response to that portion. And Kamala's response was probably even more jarring, because not once did she say something like, yes, as a black woman who was also of East Indian heritage, I stand proudly on blah, 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 et cetera, right? There was no claiming of being Black, real talk. She completely dismissed the opportunity to not only address her supposed Blackness, but she bypassed the opportunity to honor that she would be the first female president of East Indian and African heritage. And what a milestone that is for the nation. I just couldn't get beyond, the reason why she would not address, especially amid all the controversy within our community about her being Black or not Black or whatever, mixed race or whatever the case is, to address specifically that matter, and for anyone else, not only for Black people who have, queries about that, but for the nation who may also be wondering, okay, well, what is you, girl, woman? Where are you at? Where do you stand? Because if there's, all this ambiguity surrounding your race and all this hesitation about claiming space and being definitive about what it is that you are, how the hell could I expect you to uphold policy with any ardent, vehement intensity? Things like that really matter to the people who are watching, even for the people who don't necessarily put, that as a concern on display. People are watching, and the hesitance is translating in many more ways and within many dimensions than one may think. Instead of claiming space in that moment, she opted to, say, oh, well, let's not be pointing these fingers. That was her response. Well, let's not do the pointing of fingers. Why are we pointing fingers? Excuse me? I just sat back, completely dumbfounded by the level of disrespect posed throughout the entire debacle of the debate, towards the country and particularly towards the Black community. No interest, no level of importance shown to us, no intention whatever to the causes and to the matters that are heavily crippling and stifling our community. I was over it. But of course, there was certainly a bunch of meaningless, futile, inconsequential nonsense spoken about, things like Russia and the Ukraine, a war that is not even on the plates of American people. It's not in our daily diet of 8 to 14-hour days worked in the week. Okay? It is not within the hardship that we face of having households to feed and provide for. The Ukraine is not in the diet of lousy living conditions that we deal with as we break our backs to pay for those lousy living conditions. Okay, Russia and Ukraine do not sit at the table with us while we are figuring out what bill we may have to skip out on this month in order to pay for the other three. I can't help, but have a dejected outlook on everything that I saw and within everything that's unfolding in the government as a whole. It's looking very bleak to me, you guys. I think Black people across the nation right now have an important space, as we always do, real talk, to make some tangible changes within our own lifestyles, and most of all within our thinking, because the consciousness has to be raised among us, among the real ones, among us who prioritize our intelligibility, our gaze, our energy, our sense of awareness, and our movement. For me, it's time to start opening up the heavy discourse that we need to have and the action that can propel our progress in all the ways that we need it, okay? Even in the most basic of ways, because the reality is that you cannot do anything without the fundamentals. Let's begin to figure out what those fundamental things are in our lives and begin taking the steps necessary to treat those things with severity and vehemence and fierce attention. The power is in the root, and the power is always in the people, especially my people. Black, no sugar, please. Peace.